One. Hello, welcome everybody. This is Jorge Espinoza coming at you live and direct from Carlsbad Seaside Academy with our Be Smart program. And it is my distinct pleasure to welcome our PTA president, Ms. Pooja.
Thank you, Mr. Espinoza. Hi, I'm Pooja Kasarkar, president of CSA PTA. Good evening and welcome. This is our first virtual event, Be Smart for Kids. This presentation is designed to help parents and adults to have normalized conversation about gun safety and take responsible actions that can prevent child gun deaths and injuries. We felt this was an important conversation to bring into our community due to increases fear, anxiety, isolation, and loneliness our children might be facing during this pandemic. Now I would like to pass over to Lori with Be Smart for Kids for tonight's presentation. Thank you all for joining. Have a good evening.
Thank you so much for your introduction and for being here tonight and all the work you're doing to keep your family safe. I'm here tonight to talk about Be Smart for Kids, a free educational program developed by Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America to bring together parents and all adults concerned about kids, guns, and safety. So you'll be hearing a lot of numbers during my presentation, but here are some of the latest. Since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, sales of firearms have exploded. According to The Trace, Americans bought an estimated 1.7 million guns last month, a 52% increase from the previous November. And sales have topped 20 million for the year so far, far surpassing the previous record of almost 17 million in 2016. And many of these buyers are first-time gun owners who may not have had the proper training in firearm safety due to the pandemic or other reasons. So as the introduction said, my name's Lori Van Orden. I'm the mother of 2 adult children, and I was a kindergarten teacher for almost 20 years. Since the tragedy at Sandy Hook Elementary School in 2012, I knew that I wanted to work towards gun violence prevention, especially in how it impacts our children. I learned about the Be Smart program and its non-political approach to keeping children safe, and I hope you will find it as powerful as I do. Next slide. So there are a lot of numbers, and here's the first one. Firearms are the second leading cause of death for American children and the leading cause of death for Black children. As this slide shows, nearly 1,500 American children under the age of 18 are killed with guns every year, and that's an average of 4 children every day. When American children are killed with guns, the majority of those deaths, 53%, are homicides. That's nearly 800 children per year. Additionally, 600 children die by firearm suicide each year, and nearly 100 are unintentionally shot and killed. So next slide. We know that approximately 4.6 million US children live in a household with at least one loaded, unlocked gun. And while school shootings and mass shootings typically make national headlines, the reality is that for children under the age of 13, gun homicides most frequently occur in the home. And one study showed that nearly 90% of unintentional shooting deaths and injuries among children under the age of 15 also occur in the home. And what's more, we know that in past situations of gunfire on school grounds, 78% of shooters under the age of 18 obtained the guns or gun from their home or the homes of relatives or friends. So I know this is an emotional issue and we may come from different walks of life. You are all parents, some of you are gun owners and some of you are not. You may have had a personal experience with guns, and some of you may even be gun violence survivors. We believe that most gun owners want to be responsible gun owners. So we are here today to talk about what all of us, gun owners and non-gun owners alike, can do to make sure that children don't have unsupervised access to guns. Next slide, please. So for now, let's leave politics at the door, and I think we can all agree on these 3 things. First, we want all kids to grow up happy and healthy. Second, we each have the right to make responsible decisions about how to protect our homes, families, and communities, and that includes whether or not to have a gun in our home. And then 3, if we can prevent even one child gun death or injury, it's our responsibility to do so. So I'm not here today to talk about laws or policies, so let's set those aside for now. Next slide. So this is an American problem, and I want to take a few minutes to talk specifically about what the consequences of unsecured guns looks like. On this slide, you'll see just a few headlines from stories from across the country, although we know there are many incidences that go unreported. So some of you may remember from the news the first story in the top left. In January of 2018, there was a school shooting in Kentucky at Marshall County High School. At least 16 people were shot and wounded, and 2 of them, Bailey Holt and Preston Cope, were killed. The 16-year-old shooter had gained access to his stepfather's unsecured pistol from the bedroom. The next tragedy took place in May of 2018. A 4-year-old boy from Louisa, Virginia, unintentionally shot his 2-year-old brother Tyson after accessing an unsecured gun that was kept high in an upper cabinet. So the next headline on the bottom left illustrates that when kids are looking to carry guns out of fear, easy access to guns can facilitate the cycle of violence. Like 17-year-old King Zeke of Jackson, Mississippi, who told the Jackson Free Press that some young people in his community carry guns out of fear of being robbed or shot and believe that having a gun will allow them to defend themselves. And then lastly, let me point to our final story about 13-year-old Mikey from Brewster, New York. Mikey was a friendly, popular 8th grader. He was an expert bowler, an avid athlete, and he loved video games. In January 2013, Mikey came home from school and took one of his father's unlocked, loaded guns, and he died by suicide. His family knew Mikey to be a happy kid, and they don't believe he had planned to die that day. But with easy access to a loaded gun, Mikey made an impulsive decision that became a fatal one. All 4 of these stories show the fallout of when young people get their hands on unsecured guns. No story is quite the same, but all are tragic and all are preventable. Next slide. So it's important to remember, even if you are practicing responsible storage, or if you don't even have a gun in your home, you can't be sure about other homes. You can't be sure about how responsible other people are being. And that's where our Be Smart program becomes helpful. So what can we do? We can learn to be smart. Next slide. So let's start with the S. Secure your guns in homes and vehicles. 13 million households with children contain at least one gun. And the majority of children in gun-owning households know where the gun is stored. And we already know that when there is an incidence of gunfire on school grounds, the majority of shooters under the age of 18 obtain the gun or guns from their home or homes of relatives or friends, just like in the story that we told about Marshall County High School in Kentucky. So what do I mean by securing guns? Guns should be stored locked and unloaded with ammunition stored separately. Hiding a gun is not securing a gun. And we know that can lead to tragedy. We talked about the 4-year-old Virginia boy who unintentionally shot his 2-year-old brother after accessing an unsecured gun that was stored high in an upper cabinet. And we should remember King Zeke from Mississippi, who spoke of the complicated safety reasons that push some teens to want a gun. Keep in mind that kids may feel a variety of emotions about guns, from curiosity to fascination to fear. As adults, it's our responsibility to prevent easy access to firearms. Research also finds that responsible storage is associated with a decreased risk of firearm suicide and unintentional firearm injury among children. One study showed that households that locked both firearms and ammunition had a 78% lower risk of self-inflicted firearm injuries among children and teenagers, and an 85% lower risk of unintentional firearm injuries. So some commonly used responsible storage practices include using a cable lock, lockbox, firearm safe, as well as storing firearms unloaded with ammunition stored separately. Unsecured guns also contribute to the staggering number of guns stolen each year. An estimated 380,000 guns are stolen from private gun owners each year, and gun owners were 3 times more likely to have a gun stolen if they carried their gun in the last month. Research also suggests that nearly 1/4 of stolen guns are taken from cars. So storing a gun in a glove compartment or underneath a car seat is not considered responsible storage. Next slide, please. M is for modeling responsible behavior. Every law-abiding adult has the right to decide whether or not to have a gun in their home, but you can't rely on curious kids not to find a gun. As we saw on the slide before, one study showed that the majority of children are aware of where their parents store their guns, and that more than 1/3 reportedly handled their parents' guns, many doing so without the knowledge of their parents. Nearly 1/4 of parents did not know that their children had handled the gun in their house. So it's always an adult's responsibility to prevent unauthorized access to guns, not a curious child's responsibility to avoid guns. Talk to your kids about gun safety, but remember that's a precaution, not a guarantee. One other study found that young children who go through a week-long gun safety training are just as likely as children with no training to approach or play with a handgun when they find one. Modeling responsible behavior means that smart adults make sure that kids don't have the opportunity to access guns. So that being said, you can't control the environment that your child is in all the time, so you should teach them not to touch a gun if they come across one, real or pretend, and give them the tools to get out of a dangerous situation and to alert an adult. It's your responsibility to do everything you can to prevent them from getting in a dangerous situation to begin with. We also have a handout on best practices for talking to children and teens about guns, and we can make sure that that's available to you. Thank you. Next slide. So now we're on to the letter A. And as we've mentioned, there are approximately 4.6 million US children living in a household with at least one loaded unlocked gun. That's why you need to ask about firearms in other homes your child visits, and that's the A in SMART. As parents and caretakers, we ask about a lot of things already. So for example, potential allergens, pets in the home, pools, car seats when they're traveling, who's going to be home for play dates, how much TV and screen time, alcohol access. So there are a lot of things that we already talk about. So next slide. So asking about guns in the home should be as natural as asking about any other safety issue, but it can seem awkward at first. So try making it part of your general safety conversation. So you might try asking via email or text if you're uncomfortable at first. So if you look at the slide, the example is texting back and forth, he isn't allergic to anything. One other safety question, do you guys have guns in the home? I know kids are curious and just want to make sure if you do have any that they are securely stored. So screen time is okay, just in case they want to play and we have time. If not, then that's okay too. So no guns. Great, yes, video games are okay. So if it's part of the general conversation, and I know back before coronavirus when we've been tabling, and we talked to a lot of parents, more and more parents are telling us that they are asking these questions. So it's great and it's very important. So moving on, please, thank you. All right, so moving on to the letter R. So let's talk about recognizing the role of guns in suicide, the R. Access to a gun can mean the difference between life and death. We saw that in Mikey's story. As our children get older, you may need to consider taking another look at your storage methods. If you've been using a simple cable lock, you may want to think about getting a gun safe. We all know how curious children can be, and as they get older and more resourceful, we need to act accordingly. Also, if you know your loved one is in distress, you might want to consider temporarily removing a gun from your home. Take this information into consideration. Most people who attempt suicide do not die unless they use a gun. In fact, 85% of suicide attempts with a gun result in death, a much higher fatality rate than any other means of self-harm. This contributes to the fact that 40% of child suicides involve a gun. Now, if you consider temporarily removing a gun from your home, how can you do that and where can you bring it? In some states, local law enforcement may be willing to temporarily store your guns. Here in San Diego, some licensed gun dealers or gun ranges may be willing to temporarily store your guns. Or you could temporarily store your guns in the home of a friend or family member. There's a website, it's called up2sd.org. It's up to us. And there's a section in it called Prevent Firearms Suicide. And on that website, they have further details on how to store guns legally with gun dealers or with friends and family members, because there are rules involved. So check that out if you're looking for more information. So next slide, please. So the National Youth Survey conducted by the CDC showed that 17% of high school students surveyed had seriously considered attempting suicide within the last year. And I don't have the actual numbers, but I would guess that in this time of coronavirus, that is probably increased. One study showed that 41% of adolescents in gun-owning households report having easy access to the guns in their home. As we discussed earlier, research shows that responsible firearm storage is associated with a decreased risk of child firearm suicide. So next slide, please. Here are some resources regarding suicide, and also we have some materials that we can share with you all about getting help and recognizing these and other warning signs. And it also includes the suicide prevention hotline. So next slide. So the letter T, and what T stands for is tell. That is the power of being smart. So we've heard from people that because of Be Smart, they know to ask about the presence of guns before their children go to other people's homes, that they have talked to family members about guns in the homes where they have recognized the role of guns in suicide, and that gun owners are modeling responsible behavior, all as a direct result of Be Smart. So who are you going to tell to be smart today? So research shows that law enforcement, military, hunting, or outdoor groups are good at communicating the safe storage message as well. So next slide. So be smart. Secure all guns in your homes and vehicles. Model responsible behavior. Ask about unsecured guns in other homes. Recognize the role of guns in suicide, and tell your peers to be smart. So next slide. So thank you so much for letting us share the message of Be Smart for Kids with you here today. We have a volunteer team in San Diego County, and we're prepared to present this program to your group in English or Spanish, and there is never a cost. And during these virtual times, we can do it via Zoom, or hopefully in the future, we'll be meeting again in person. So you can find out more on a national level at besmartforkids.org. And you can contact me at besmartsd1@gmail.com. So if you have any suggestions or other input you'd like to share with us, we would welcome that. And we thank you so much for letting us share the message of Be Smart. Thank you.